Good evening, everyone. First of all, a very welcome to today's session. Thanks for joining us. I just wanted to do a quick audio check regarding the volume. Am I loud enough? Am I loud enough? Okay, right. Great. Thanks for the confirmations. So at any point of time, if you stop seeing the screen or if you stop hearing me, please log out and log in again. There may be some internet issue at your end. And if there is any internet issue at my end, I will let you know. All right. So in today's session, so we will be discussing about how you can fund your bachelor's degree. So if there is anybody here who is expecting to get information about uh, funding MBA studies or master's programs or PhD programs, then this session is not for you. We have sessions for you as well later this week. So don't have to stay on for this one. This is only and only for people who want to do their bachelor's degree. So we will be covering funding options for bachelor's degree only, right? So if you are not somebody who is interested in that, then please feel free to log out. How many of you are Jamboree students? So if you are a Jamboree student, can you type a yes? And if you are not a Jamboree student, can you type in no in the chat window? So if you are a Jamboree student, type yes. If no, then type no. Okay, great, great. Thanks for your responses. So I see that a lot of you are not Jamboree students. So a little bit about Jamboree very quickly. So we have been around since 1993. We are a completely study abroad focused company. So we teach for only exams which are required for studying abroad. And we do extensive admissions counseling for universities abroad and universities in India which accept the SAT. So nowadays there are quite a few universities in India also which accept SAT. So we do admissions counseling for those universities as well. So we don't deal with other exams such as your IIT entrances or any other exams. We are primarily on SAT, ACT, and undergrad university admissions counseling. Right. We have 39 physical centers, and we do a lot of online teaching as well. So we deliver our SAT and ACT classes through a classroom, through online and through live virtual classroom kind of teaching, right? So if some of you who were our classroom students, so during this whole lockdown, so our classes are being conducted online. I hope you are going to your online classes as well. Those of you who are not a Jamboree students, so if you want a demo SAT class or a profile evaluation session, you can leave your number in the chat. We will not be addressing anything related to the SAT exam or profile evaluation or extracurricular activities. We will not be discussing anything of that sort in today's session. But if you want a free SAT demo class or a free profile evaluation session, we will be happy to get in touch with you later this week. So please, you can leave your number in the chat. Okay, so in the during the session, please do not ask questions that are related to like SAT preparation or profile evaluation. We would be doing one-on-one sessions with you if you leave your number in the chat. This session, the target time is I'll try to cover whatever I have in 45 minutes. And then like after that, I would open it up for Q&A. So I would not take much of your time. You can budget about an hour. All right. So moving on, some basic housekeeping before the session. You all are using the chat feature already, which is great. But while I am speaking, please don't type in your questions in the chat window. I will not be able to answer your questions and conduct the session. At regular intervals, I would be pausing and I will be asking for questions. So that's the time when you should be posting your questions in the chat window. So all your questions and doubts, if possible, you can hold those off for the Q&A session that we'll have at the end. or if you have to leave in the middle, for some anything, if you have to leave in the middle, if you have to drop out, then do leave your number in the chat so that our team will get in touch with you and clarify your doubts. Okay. So very beginning, at the very outset, so when students or parents, when they speak to us, they talk about what's the expense, uh, what are the fees, etc., etc. So I would first like to talk about the different types of fees. So the fees in universities is not the same for the domestic students and international students. So international students always pay higher. By the way, this session is getting recorded. So you will be getting an email by Monday. So the recording of the session you will get by Monday through an email. Email ID that you have used to register for the session, you will get the recording there. So you need not take notes or anything, but you are welcome to take screenshots if you want to. All right. So moving on, so I first want to cover the different types of fees. So this is the language that you will see in the university websites. So you should know what it means. So if you go to any US or Canadian university, right? So you in the fees section, you will see this language: in-state fee and out-state fee. Now, what does that mean? So in-state is something that a domestic student would pay. So if you want to go to a US university and you have a US passport, so then this is what will be applicable to you. But if you don't fall in that category, then you have to pay the outstate fee. So when you are doing your budgeting, when you are calculating the cost, so take the outstate fee into consideration, not the in-state fee. The in-state fee is not applicable to you. Usually, if the in-state fee is X, then the outstate fee is about 4x. Most of the times it's about 4 times. In some universities that it can be 3.5 times more, but it's definitely far higher for international students than for domestic students. So you have to keep this in mind, right? When you're looking for fees information on the university websites, always stick to university websites, because that is where you will get updated information about fees. Don't rely on any blogs, etc., etc. If you have to find the fees of a particular university, go to that university website, go to the fees section. There you will encounter some other type of language, things like per credit hour, right? I don't know whether you have started your university search or not. I don't know whether you have started going through the fees or not, etc., etc. So you will see this language that some amount will be quoted, let's say $630, per credit hour, let's say. Now, what's the meaning of this per credit hour, right? So per credit hour means per hour of classes that's being conducted per week. So as an undergrad student, somebody enrolled in a university to pursue a bachelor's degree, international students are required to register for minimum 12 hours per semester, right? So minimum 12 hours the student has to enroll for per semester. In some universities it is 15 also, so do check that up. So if you are getting the fee information on the university website as a some per credit hour, then you just have to then multiply it by 12. So this will be your minimum per semester. And in a year there are 3 semesters, by the way, not 2 semesters. So the fees, now let's if I have to go through this math, I'll just make it 600 for ease of calculation. So if any university website you see that the fees is $600 per credit hour, then you have to multiply it by 12. So that's the minimum that you have to do. Then multiply it by 2.5, right? So this is going to be your tuition fees. So when you do see this information, so when you do see this kind of language, then go through, do this calculation so that you know what the fees is. And on top of that, there are going to be some fixed annual fees. All of that information will be there in the website, but you should know how to calculate so that you finally end up getting the correct amount, per year. 2.5 because there are 2 full semesters where you have to take 12 hours of classes. Then the summer semester is usually shorter, and you have to take 3 to 6 hours. That's why 2.5 and not 3. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Okay, any questions regarding the language that you will encounter on the university websites about fees? Anybody has any questions? Right, anybody has any questions about information specific on this slide? No? Okay. So yeah, Karthik, your question is, will a US citizen currently studying in India, completing 12th in India, be considered for in-state or outstate? Now that is very, very university specific. Some universities, they will allow you to apply for in-state fee, but a lot of universities will not allow you to apply for in-state fees. So my recommendation is that if you have any university in mind, you email them and find out. Some universities require that the parent would have paid taxes for the last 2 years in that US taxes for the last 2 years. That is some universities requirements. So if you have any particular university in mind, before doing your budgeting, please email them and find out whether you are eligible for in-state fees or not. So Karthik, is that clear? So outstate and international is the same. So Vinayak, I think your question was also similar to Karthik's. I hope that is clear. So if you are, so this information is for people who, children who have US passports, but they have not been in the US, or they have not been studying in the US for the last 2 years. So if your child has a US passport, but he has not been studying in the US for the last 2 years, then you have to email the university and find out whether he is eligible to pay the in-state fee or not. Okay. Moving on. Now, types of universities. We'll talk about how the type of university that makes a difference. So there you will see the language private universities and public universities. So which is private universities similar to what we call in India private universities. So outside also, abroad also, they call them private universities. In India, what we call government colleges, or state colleges, so those are called public. So when you see a university, if it's a public college, a public university, then it's going to be far cheaper than a private university, right? A private university, the fees are very, very high. But unlike India, in India, your best colleges are always government colleges, and private universities, they are probably not considered to be as prestigious as a government college. But in the US or abroad, that's not the case. For example, in the US, your MIT, Stanford, Harvard, all of them are private universities and extremely expensive, of course. Public universities are universities where you have the name state, like if you have any Arizona State University, North Carolina State University, State University of New York. So wherever you have the name state, that is a public university. Some universities, they don't have the name state in it, but those are also public universities. You will find that information clearly on the university website. So private universities are far more expensive than public universities, but private universities at the same time, they give far more scholarships to international students. So it's a tricky situation. Private universities are more expensive, but they also give far more scholarships to international students. Public universities are cheaper, but they don't give that many scholarships out to international students. For example, University of Texas Austin is a public university. Pennsylvania State University, Penn State, that's a public university. So for international students, they don't give scholarships for the first year at all. After you do well in the first year, that's when you become eligible for scholarships, etc., etc. So you have to be very careful about that. Public universities are cheaper, but they don't give out a lot of scholarships to international students. Now just for just for your information, what are some of the top private universities? Now this is information that would really you should keep in mind while finalizing your universities, especially if finance is a concern or is an area of interest for you. So some of the top private universities are Harvard, MIT, Yale, Stanford, UPenn. These are some of the top most private universities. They're extremely expensive, right? These are the top public universities. UC Berkeley, so you might have heard about that. UCLA, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, UT Austin, Georgia Tech, all very good universities, but they're public universities, so they are going to be cheaper. The cost is going to be cheaper than a top private university, but you will get lots of scholarships in these universities. The scholarship amounts available to international students in the first year in these universities not that high. In fact, hardly any, right? Then there are the mid-end private universities. They are not the topmost like Ivy League colleges. The mid-end, very good, but they're not the like top 20 colleges. Boston University, University of Rochester, Johns Hopkins, NYU, New York University. So they are the mid-end private universities. Right? Again, they are going to be not as expensive as this category, but still they are going to be expensive, but they also have lots of scholarships available. Then these are the mid-end public universities: Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin Madison, Purdue, Texas A&M. Great universities. This is like the sweet spot. If you can get into this type of colleges, great education at affordable cost. So this is like for people who are for budget is a concern. I'm talking about that. So this is the sweet spot. Great education at affordable cost, right? Now I mean I'll talk about scholarships and all of that also, but when you're budgeting, when you're planning a degree abroad, so I think some of you here are parents, right? So parents, when you are planning for your child's education abroad, then you should always consider the worst case scenario when it comes to budget, right? Worst case scenario is that your child does not get any kind of scholarship. So that is the worst case scenario. So your budgeting should be done based on the worst case scenario. Otherwise, there should not be a situation where your child gets into, let's say, one of these colleges or one of these colleges, but you are not able to, you are not able to afford the fees. So don't put your child in such a situation. So when you're making a budget for your child, assume that he is not going to get any scholarship. Ultimately, scholarships cannot be guaranteed. The applicant pool changes drastically every year. You cannot plan an education abroad thinking that I will get a scholarship. So that is not a very good strategy, right? So you should apply, of course, but you should also apply to some safe bet colleges that you can actually afford, right? So again, what I wanted to draw your attention to is the language, right? So the mid and private and the top public colleges would cost about the same, right? So these two categories of colleges would cost about the same. However, you have more chances of getting a scholarship from this category than this category. Okay. All right. So I hope this is clear. So in terms of numbers, numbers, the top private university, the cost of attendance, that means tuition plus cost of living, would be can be as high as $60,000 to $75,000 per year. So this category can easily be a 60 to 75K per year, right? Dollars, not like rupees, of course. So this category is easily the most expensive, right? This and this category both would be around 50 45 to 50K category. Let me try to write it down for you. Right, so both these categories would be around 45 to 55 K per year, right? And then the mid and this can be anything ranging from 25. This is a massive range, 25 to 40K per year again. Okay. The UK universities are far more expensive. The good universities like the Oxford, Cambridge, London Business School, London School of Economics, the European universities, they are extremely expensive and hardly any scholarships. They're extremely expensive because the pound or the euro, it tends to be far more expensive than the dollar. So that is another reason. Canadian universities, even your top universities like University of Toronto, etc., would fall in this range, right? So even a top Canadian university maximum would be in this range. You will get lots of Canadian universities in this range, right? The Asian universities are, of course, very, very cost effective. Your universities in Singapore, universities in Hong Kong, National University of Singapore, Nanyang Tech, University of Hong Kong, HKUST, they would all be, they would all be in a very affordable range of this, closer to this, closer to this actually, right? So Asian universities are far more affordable, but they are extremely difficult to get admission in. You would need 95% plus in your 10th, 11th, and 12th. So admission is extremely difficult, right? The European universities, they are also expensive, and at the same time, they don't have many scholarships available for international students, right? So, so is that clear? Anything we want to discuss about the numbers? So this is overall, yes. So cost of attendance means tuition plus cost of living. So public mid-end scholarships also same as top public, so not many scholarships available. So any other, is it clear about the budgets depending on your Canada, Europe, or the budget estimation, all of that clear? Now, when you apply for a bachelor's degree, by the way, so it does not matter whether you are applying for engineering or economics or humanities, the fees is going to be uniform for all students. So the basic fees. So for engineering, there may be an additional fee, right? So, but that's very minimal. It's not going to make a huge dent in your budget. So the Australian universities, Singapore universities, so they are cheaper. They are not as expensive as your US and Canadian or European universities, right? So far cheaper means, so if so within a $20,000 per, $20K per year would be, good enough, right? Okay. So the cost I'm talking about, this is cost of attendance. That means tuition plus cost of living. So these are ballpark estimates, obviously. Different universities have different fees. Once you get to the university finalization states, so you will probably, find the exact fees. And every year, whatever data is like that is available right now, if university fees is, let's say, $50,000 per year, every year the fee goes up by about 5%. So you have to take that also into your calculation. The fees don't remain the same. Okay, now let me talk a little bit about scholarship and financial aid, right? So now scholarship and financial aid, they are not that available to international students for European colleges. Singapore, yes, there are some Singapore government scholarships available, and for that you have to work in Singapore for 2 years after your graduation, which is actually good. So it's like almost guaranteed that you are going to get a job and work there for 2 years. So that's actually a good thing. In terms of scholarships, the European colleges also don't have that many scholarships for international students. Canada gives out some scholarships, but like less than 5% of the international students end up getting scholarships in Canada. Right? So in terms of scholarship, the best destination is the US. So if you are looking, if you're a bright student, you have a good profile, if you think you have a good chance of getting a scholarship, then you should apply to some US colleges. And if you're not clear about which destination to go to, my advice is always that, that apply to a mix of colleges. Some colleges in the US, some in Canada, some in Australia, some in UK. And once you get the admission offers and scholarship offers in hand, then make up your mind. So never ever restrict yourself to a single destination. Of course, if you're 100% sure that you want to go to only Australia or only Canada, that's a different story. But um, especially to I'm addressing the parents right now. It's not usually a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket, right? So apply to the best of colleges across the world, and depending on which college you get admission in, which college you get scholarship from, then you take the final decision about which country you want to send your child to, right? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of questions about profile evaluation and etc etc. What is a good percentage? So as I mentioned earlier, so we'll not be addressing those in today's session. If you have any such question, please leave your number in the chat window. We will get the admissions team to call you, and if you are looking for a free SAT class, a free profile evaluation session, then do leave your number in the chat window, and we'll take it up. Am I audible? Is my voice fine? Okay, all right. So some of you mentioned that I'm not very audible. So there may be some internet connection at your end. You may want to log out and log in. So in the US, there is also something called community colleges. So community colleges are not universities. They give out only 2-year degrees, right? And on that 2-year degrees, you don't get any preference for the work visa or anything, right? So in the US, the community colleges, even if you do go to a community college, it's always advisable that after the first year you try to get a transfer to a university, right? Okay, now let's talk about scholarships and financial aid. So handful of the top universities such as Harvard, MIT, Yale, etc., they give up to 100% need-based aid. So need-based means after you get admission, now these specific colleges, after you get admission, so your parents will have to submit their IT returns, income tax returns, and based on that, they will decide whether you can afford their fees or not. So let's say that their fees is 100. I'm just giving a number. And let's say after assessing your parents' financial situation, the university decides that you can afford only 80. Then the university will give you the balance 20. Right? So these are some handful of top universities in the US. So they just care about getting the best students in the world. So if you are good enough to get admission in these colleges, then money is not a problem. The university will give up to 100. So basically what it means is that, let's say that your the university fees is, let's say, 100, and after assessing your parents financial situation, if they decide that they cannot afford anything, so then the university will give you this 100, give you the full scholarship. Full scholarship means the fees as well as the cost of living, right? So now getting admission in these colleges is not easy. You can probably understand by the names, Harvard, MIT, Yale. It's extremely difficult to get admission in these colleges. But if you are good enough, then you will, then money is not a problem, right? Now their admission policy is need blind. So what this means is that if there are two students, A and B, and both of them are good enough to get admission, let's say A has the money but B does B has the money but A does not have the money. Let's take this situation. So these universities, they don't care that A doesn't have the money, that A cannot afford. They don't care. What they will do is that they will give A the money, right? So whether the student has the money to attend that university or not, whether the student can afford that university or not, so that does not impact the admission decision of the university, right? The universities will give admission to all the students who meet their admissions criteria. So that kind of policy is called need blind. So now there's another category of colleges like Brown, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, etc. They also give need-based aid. That means after you get admission, you have the option of applying for need-based financial aid. That means you are telling them that I cannot afford your tuition. So these are the documents to prove that my parents cannot afford the fees. Therefore, like give me aid, right? So that is called need-based aid. So there's a separate application process for that. So you can apply for that, and if they think that you are good enough, so they will give you up to 100%. So just like the first category of colleges, but there's a catch. These colleges now, Brown, Stanford, etc., their admission policy is not need blind. What this means is that if there are two students, again A and B, and A has the money to and can pick this college, B does not have. So as soon as as soon as the university scholarship budget gets over, they will then reject B. They will take A, right? So the second category of universities, they have a limit. Their scholarship budget is not unlimited, right? The top category of these category of colleges, their scholarship bucket is unlimited. They care about, they want the best students in the world, and if required, they will give 100% scholarship to everyone. They just want the best students. But this category of colleges, their scholarship budget or bucket is not unlimited. So as soon as they run out of funds, they will then give rejections to the students who who are good enough to get admission, but who are not able to afford, who cannot afford the fees, right? So there's a difference between these two categories, even though both these categories of colleges offer need-based scholarships, need-based financial aid rather, not scholarships. Okay. Then there are some other, this is the now next category, top universities such as Cornell, Columbia, all of these are Ivy League colleges. They give a combination of need-based and merit-based. Now these two categories, they do not give merit-based scholarships. So their stand or their position is that everybody who gets admission in our college is equally meritorious. So they will not give merit-based scholarships. They will give only need-based scholarships. So there are no merit-based scholarships available in these two category of colleges. The third category, Cornell, Columbia, a lot of them. This has far more colleges. So they give a combination. So now in this, again, let us take the example of A and B. So let's say that A can afford and B cannot afford. So a Cornell would give admission offer to A, okay, and Cornell would also give admission offer to B. Now if the fees is 100 and if Cornell assesses B's situation and decides that B can afford 80, then what Cornell would do, they would try to give a mix of need-based and merit-based scholarship. Maybe they can give him only 10. So 80 plus 10 is still 90. So still there's a gap of 10. But they are not going to give him a rejection. Cornell would give an admission offer to B and will give him a scholarship offer of 10. Then they will leave the decision to B. If you can manage that gap of 10, then come and attend Cornell. If you can't, then don't come, right? So that is their thing. So they're not going to give rejection to B just because he can't afford, right? So they also, this category of college also has a fixed bucket available for scholarships. They don't have unlimited scholarships, but they don't give rejection based on the fact that whether you can attend or not attend. Okay, so this is the third category. Now the fourth category is the most common type of college, right? That a lot of schools, give, a lot of colleges give merit based scholarships up to 100%. So almost all the colleges fall in this category, right? But so if, what this means is that, let's say A and B both apply to the third, this category of colleges. A is, you know A is rich and can afford the fees. B cannot afford the fees. Let's say that A is also far like better than B, so A is also a, let's say a, a plus student, right? Very very meritorious student, and B is not that meritorious, right? So in this situation, the merit based scholarship, the scholarship would still go to A because it is purely merit based. It does not take the need into account at all. So that's so merit based scholarships does not they don't take into consideration whether you can afford the fees or not. Even if you can afford the fees, but if you are meritorious, they are going to give you scholarships. If on the other hand there is a student who cannot afford the fees but who is probably not as meritorious as the other student, then he is not going to get the merit based scholarship. So there's a difference between merit based scholarships and need based scholarship, right? And how do they assess whether you need it or not? Should you have to, the parents will have to submit the income tax returns, right? So they decide based on that. So if you have any loans running, so you have to submit those documents. If you have another child, who's tuition or fees, so you have to submit those documents. So they will just see that for the next 4 years what kind of expenses you are going to incur and what kind of income that you have, and based on that the universities will take a decision, right? So from our experience, students with about more than 1300 SAT scores, if they choose their colleges wisely or intelligently, then they are usually able to manage some kind of scholarship. But again, please do not plan your education hoping to get a scholarship. It may not happen. If that is the case for you, if let's say you cannot study abroad without a scholarship, then you have to be in this category. You have to be really good enough to fall in this category. I mean, your profile has to be strong enough to be able to get admission in these types of colleges. Only then you should take the whole journey. Okay. So anything is this clear that the US financial aid and scholarship situation is a little tricky? Different categories, different language. So when you go through university websites, you will see this language a lot: need based, need blind, etc., etc. So please be very clear with the language. So is everybody clear with this language? Okay, now the merit-based scholarships, there's one now trick, I should not call it trick, strategy rather. Why do we say this? Now with merit-based scholarships are given to about the top 15% of the admitted students in a university, right? Now let's say there's a university X and there's a university Y, Z. Let's say there are 3 universities. Let's say rank wise, this university is ranked 35. I'm just example, right? This university is ranked 42, let's say. This university is ranked 50, 60, for example. Okay. Now, let's say that you get admission in all 3. Your chance of getting a scholarship would be far higher in Z. If your profile is good enough to get admission in a 35 rank college, then it means that you will probably in the top 15% of the admitted students of this college, right? So that's why, and at the end of the day, this actually this doesn't matter. There's not much difference between a school rank 35 and 45 or 35 and 60. The rankings change every year, right? You have to go by the reputation of the college matters a lot. There are colleges which are ranked in 55, 60, but they have a far more historically good reputation than some newer colleges which are in top 30, right? So so if you apply wisely, if you first of all intend definitely get a score of around 1300. Doesn't matter what your profile is, doesn't matter that if you are a national level tennis player or whatever, does not matter. Your profile, the bare minimum SAT you should target is 1300. Is the reason is that in India, a national level tennis player sounds good, but in these universities, there will be students who probably play for, are Olympic medalists, for all you know, because the sports level of US and Canada are far, far higher than in India. In India, we think playing district level is good enough, but there you will have classmates who probably play at international events, right? So just think on those terms, so because that's your competition. Okay, so that is why, when for if you're targeting the merit based scholarships, if you are willing to compromise a little bit on the rankings of the universities, then your chances of getting merit based scholarships increase a lot. Okay, so while applying to universities, please apply to a wide range of colleges. Some should be aspirational, obviously. Some should be where you will get admission, and then some where you will get admission, but you should also have a decent shot at getting scholarships. So if you apply to about 10, usually undergrad students apply to about 10 universities. So when you're applying to about 10 universities, you have enough room to uh, make sure that you have enough universities in each category. Okay, now what is meant by merit, right? So when I talk about merit, what is meant by merit, for example? Right? So I will talk about that. So how do universities assess this? Does merit mean only SAT scores, or does merit mean your school grades? What's the meaning of merit when it comes to university admission? So we'll discuss that in a later end, right? Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about loan programs, loans. Indian banks, obviously, you can get loans from Indian banks. SBI, for instance, SBI is a very good option if you are looking to take loans from Indian banks. Why? Because their rate of interest are just at around 14%. It's pretty decent. The upper limit. So if you for studying abroad is 1.5 crores. So from SBI, from the state banks, your upper limit is 1.5 crores if you are studying abroad. So and the rate of interest is around 14%. So from other banks like nationalized banks, but not necessarily state banks like your HDFC, etc., etc., the rates of interest are higher. It can sometimes go up to 17, 18% also. And the upper limits, of course, they also give up to 1 crore, and also the upper limits are not a problem. But the rates of interest, just SBI, from what we have seen, our experience is that most of our students, they go for SBI loans, right? So now the Indian banks, what happens is that, so there is again, I'm very sorry if I'm being technical. So when you take a loan, there's a principal, right? And then there's an interest amount, right? So so please read the offer document very careful. Please read the fine print. So the principal amount, for this principal amount, the banks give you time, right? So if your child's degree is going to get over in 4 years, so you have to start paying the principal from 6 months after his degree completion, or getting a job, whichever is earlier. So this period is called moratorium period. Again, I'm sorry if I'm being technical. So the moratorium period. So when you go for the loan agents would talk to you about this moratorium period, that is 6 months, in it's a 1 year, but they talk only about the principal amount. In the interest, in 99% of the banks, the interest you have to pay from day one, right? So the interest the parents will have to take care of from day one. So if you go to any bank, a bank talk to asking about student loans, SBI, because it's a sarkari thing, the government thing, so they will give you the correct information. They don't have that much of a sales push, but if you go to the private banks, they are very aggressive. They have their own targets, I assume. So they want to give out as much loans as possible. So they will talk to you a lot about the moratorium period. Oh, you don't have to start repaying till 6 months after you complete the degree, or 6 months after you get the job. But they are talking only about principal. So you should ask them that, okay, what about the interest? And then they will tell you that no, interest you have to start paying from day one. Okay, so please be careful when you talk to these loan people. Then there are now, this is a new thing in the market. It's been just for around last 4 or 5 years. There are financial institutions. They are not banks. They are called financial institutions, and they're international financial institutions. They give merit-based loans. So there are companies such as Prodigy, Empower. You can check them out on the internet. So they give merit-based loans. So what it means is that, so they will look at the college where you have got admission, the university from where you have got admission. If that university is good, so they will give you loans, right? And they will give loans without any collateral, without any co-signer. So they can give you like in a $50,000 loan, $60,000 loans, without any collateral, without any co-signer. And the rates of interest are international standards, right? So international standard, the education loans are around 9%. So around at 9 to 11% the rate of interest, depending on which country you go to for studying, at 9 to 11% rate of interest. So you can get loans from this university, from these financial institutions, but they are merit loans, merit-based loans. So if you the university has to be in their list of universities. So they have an approved list of universities. So a list of universities that they think are good. So if you get admission in that list, then that's when you become eligible for the loans. So in a sense, so they call those merit-based loans, right? So and it's very good, very advantageous, because the rates of interest are low, no collateral required, no co-signer required, right? And their moratorium periods are also that you have to pay the interest from day one, yes, but you have to repay the principal, only after 6 months after your graduation. So all of that is just similar to Indian banks. Indian banks, your the collateral is 100 to 150%. So again, I am very sorry if I'm being too technical, but when you are taking loans, you have to watch out for the language. So sometimes when you go to a bank, so the upfront rate of interest that they will tell you is say 13%, and you will become happy. But that is not a floating rate of interest. So just do ask them about that, and you will find out that the collateral is 150%. So what that means is that if you need a 20 lakhs of loan, you will have to show them property or whatever worth 30 lakhs. So the collateral 150% is not a good situation. State Bank of India requires 100%. That means if you want a 20 lakhs loan, you will have to show them property worth 20 lakhs, right? So straightforward. Okay, and they have the rate of interest is floating rate of interest. Okay, so so ask these questions. What's the rate of interest? Is it floating or fixed, right? The moratorium period, is it applicable to interest or only to principal, right? What's the collateral? Is it 100%, 150%, 200%, whatever it is, right? So if you are going to take loans from Indian banks, do ask those stuff. And for this international financial institution, you don't have to worry about collateral and etc. etc. The list of universities that they give loans for are there on the website. Okay, then the US banks. So I noticed that some of you are US citizens, the students have US passports, and or if you have relatives in the US who are willing to be co-signers, then you can take loans from US banks as well. So the US banks, the things are very similar to the international financial institutions. So the rates of interest are between 7 to 11%, and the no collateral etc are not required. Since some banks they may need a co-signer. So if you have a relative who is a green card holder, then that person can be a co-signer, right? So US banks, you can take loans from US banks as well. Can you hear me? So the US banks, so if you have a US co-signer, that means a relative or friend who is who is a US green card holder, if that person is willing to be a co-signer, then you can take loans from US banks as well. Okay, so you can explore that option. The rates of interest are very low. The education, I mean, sometimes it's as low as 7%, and of course as high as 11%, but mostly it's around 7 to 8% thing. Okay, so that is good. So if you can manage this, then nothing like it. Okay. Okay. So how to get loan for US from US bank? If you want to get loans from US bank, you need to have somebody who is a green card holder in the US who will be willing to be your co-signer. Okay, Ankit, I hope that's clear. So now, so there's some external scholarships. We talked about university scholarships, but there's some external bodies also which give scholarships, merit-based scholarships. So you'll find the university information on their website. Fulbright scholarship, so you'll find the information on the US Education Foundation in India website. The Peter Buffet scholarship, Stamps scholarship, Robertson scholarship. So all this information you can just Google. So these are like all private, private setups, right? And the admissions and the scholarship criteria varies. In some cases, you may have to write an essay. In some cases, you may have to submit your academic documents, whatever it is. But these are some external scholarships available to international students who want to study abroad, right? Tata scholarship, so yeah, so these are and this list keeps on changing there. So but at this point of time, these are some of the scholarships that's available, right? Okay, now let's just want to talk about this, that when I talked about merit scholarships earlier, what are the things? So these are the admissions criteria. All of you know, I'm pretty sure. Your SAT or ACT score, a TOEFL or IELTS score, your class 9, 10th and 11th grades, extracurricular activities, essays, letters. So these are the admissions criteria. Now in the admission process, uh, what universities do is that they assign some weightage to each parameter. So this parameter, maybe some university is going to assign 15%, I don't know, maybe this 20%, so something like this they would have, and then they would give you points for that. Out of 15, how much did you get? Out of 20, how much did you get? So based on that, every student ends up with a score, right? And after admission, they will see which are the top 15% or 15 to 20% students, and that's how they decide merit. So merit does not mean only SAT or only things of the merit comes from the entire admissions criteria of that university, right? Is that clear? So if your first language is English, by the way, if you have an Indian passport, then your first language is not English, because India is not a native English speaking country. So if your passport is an Indian passport, then you will have to take the language test, right? If your passport is an American passport, then you don't have to. Okay, so it's as straightforward as that. So standardized test is one category. So if you don't need to take the TOEFL, then obviously you will not be penalized for that. So universities assign merit in that manner. So whatever you score you get for all of these together, so based on that, they will rank all the applicants, and then they will roll out the admission offers. And of the admitted students, whoever accept the admission offer, basically, they will see which are the top 10, 15, 20% students, and they will give out the merit scholarships based on that. Okay, is that clear? So I saw some questions about how do universities decide merit. So this is their criteria. Okay, so I'm done with the information. I will just take some questions now. In the meantime, if you anybody wants a demo class or a profile evaluation, or if you want some more details about finances, etc., please leave your number in the chat window. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. And please limit your questions or restrict your questions only to funding part. If you have any other questions regarding admissions criteria, etc., etc., please leave your number in the chat and we'll get in touch with you. If you have a question, then please raise your hand. I will give you mic access and then you can ask your question. So Anamika Malhotra, okay. I'm not able. Okay. Yogesh Dharia. So Yogesh, I have given you mic access. You can ask your question.
Can we get scholarship after 1 year of education?
Yes, you can. So basically, that's actually a very good question. Just because you get a scholarship offer along with the admission does not mean that you will get it for 4 years. In some cases, they will give you a scholarship for 4 years, but in some cases, whether you can continue getting that scholarship every semester or not will depend on your grades. On the other hand, if you do well in the first year, so you become eligible for scholarships. So the scholarships, once you start the program, then it totally comes down to how you are doing. As an international student, you should try to get at least a 3 out of 4 GPA. You should try to maintain a 3 out of 4 GPA every semester to get to have a fighting chance to earn a scholarship.
Okay.
There's another advantage, by the way. If you get a merit scholarship, from the university, then it usually comes with in-state fee. What that means is that, let's say you get a $20,000 merit scholarship. Along with that, they often bundle it with a fee waiver, saying that you now don't have to pay the outstate fee, you pay in-state fee. So there is a double, advantage of being able to, when you get a scholarship.
Okay.
Arvind Srinivasan. Okay, I'm not able to find Arvind. Sri Dikshita. Yes, Sri Dikshita, what's your question?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to ask if IELTS scores are also accepted for US universities.
Yes, yes. TOEFL or IELTS?
Mandatory. TOEFL is mandatory.
No, TOEFL. So if you go to the IELTS.org website, you will see the list of US colleges which accept IELTS. So IELTS is accepted by around 60% of US universities. So, but TOEFL is accepted in all the US colleges. So if the college that you want to go to accepts IELTS, then you can take IELTS also, no problem.
Okay, okay. And what is normally the SAT score that is expected for admissions into good colleges like the Ivy League colleges that you have mentioned?
From Indian students, they expect at least a 1500. Because Indian students score very high. The good Indian students, they score very high on the SAT. So if you want to get into the Ivy League colleges, 1500 is what you should be targeting.
Okay.
Shubha Vadba. Yes, Shubha Vadba, you can unmute.
Yeah, I would like to know, could you please explain need blind once again? I'm not very clear. Need based is clear, but not need blind.
Shubha, because I've already done it, I would recommend that you watch the recording when the recording reaches you by Monday. Veena Selvam, what's your question?
Yeah, I would like to know, you mentioned some financial institutions which give loans in India. Can you name some of them?
Right, they're on the screen. Prodigy, Empower.
Prodigy, Empower. Okay.
Yeah. You can take a screenshot of this if you want.
Okay. Another question that I have is, do the US universities abroad, do they require fee payment every semester or at the beginning of the year? How is the fee payment structure?
See, in US, it's a per semester. In UK and Canada, it's mostly per year.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Aryan Poddar, what's your question? Yes, Aryan Poddar, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I have two questions. One is that when should we apply for the scholarship? Is during the application process or after I'm getting the admitted kind of a signal? Secondly, in case I want to show my financial position, am I supposed to show the financial position for the entire 4 years or only for the particular year of the admission?
Okay, I'll take your first question. So for the merit-based scholarships, you don't have to, there's no separate application process. Your admission application itself will do. For the need-based scholarships, there is a separate process. The deadline is usually February, February 1st or March 1st. And it is called a CSS profile. So there's something called CSS profile that you have to submit. So if the university deadlines, let's say November or December, let's say. So this, the deadline for submitting the CSS profile can be February 1st or March 1st, right? So this is where you are entering your your parents' ITR details and etc. But this is for the need-based financial aid, right? The scholarship part, you don't have to apply separately. Universities consider your admission application itself for scholarship. And now, what is the next question?
The second question that am I supposed to show my financial position for the entire 4 years of the academic course or only for the particular 1 year of the admission?
First, the latest year, the first year.
Only the first year. Okay. So on that basis, they can judge my forthcoming financials possibly. Okay. And one more straight question, possibly I shouldn't ask this, whether application for the scholarship hampers my admission process. If I'm applying, that is taken as negative or always. I understand the need based and whatever, but still.
Yeah. So when I talked about the scholarships in the second category of colleges like Stanford, etc., there, there, if you say that you will need the scholarship to attend their college, so that and so if they don't have money, they will give you a rejection offer.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am.
It makes a difference.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's PPC.
Yes, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I heard that there is a special provision for international students in Texas institutions. Is that so? Are there Texas universities offer scholarship to international students?
No, there's no special thingy. All the universities, I mean, 90% of the universities offer scholarships. In fact, in Texas itself, UT Austin, University of Texas Austin is a very good public university. But they don't give scholarship to international students in the first year. So the rules apply across. So it's not that they have special, special case for international students.
Okay.
Prajwal.
Yeah, hello. Like for the US passport holder, if the university is taking the international fees for first year, will they consider the student the domestic fees from the second year?
No, it's actually you have, when you prove your residency, for scholarship purpose and all, it's not to do with the student. They see whether the parents have like submitted the taxes for the last 2 years in the US or not. So that is the case with most universities, to be eligible for their federal aid scheme. So that's what you have to check. But I would still recommend though, because universities, they change their rules quite frequently. So I would still recommend that once you have finalized your list of universities, you should email them and check. But at the same time, if your child, after the first year or in the first semester itself, if he qualifies for a scholarship or assistantship, then there's a high probability that the fees he will have to pay, in state and not out state.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Pani, do you have a question? Funny, there's a, if you can unmute yourself, Funny, if you have a question. Okay, not able to reach Funny. So Aparna, just I'm giving mic access to you.
Yeah, hello ma'am. Can you hear me?
Can you speak a little louder? I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
No, still not clear.
Yeah, hello ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better. Can you speak a
Yeah.
little?
Just I wanted to know that how we will come to know that which all universities are need based and merit based. Is it mentioned on their websites or what? Hello.
All this information is there on the university website. So all this
Achha,
information is available on the university website.
achha, all, in almost all the universities mention these things.
Not almost, in all the universities.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you so much.
So we'll take just 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. So if I'm not able, if I have not addressed any of your questions, again, please leave your number in the chat. Our team will get in touch with you and address. So I'll just take 2 more questions. Whoever questions I'm not able to address, please leave your number in the chat window. So yes, Ankit Kumar, what's your question?
I am audible, ma'am.
Yes, I can hear you.
Actually, ma'am, I want to know about what are the documents that I show when I applying to need-based scholarship. I don't know about that.
So I already addressed this question that when you apply for scholarships, then you don't need any separate document. Your admission application itself will work as a as a scholarship application. You don't need to do anything separate. But if you're applying for the need-based scholarships, then on the screen, I hope you see it's written CSS profile. So go just type on Google CSS profile, go to the website and see what details they require. So they will require income tax returns details of your parents. Okay, so this is the last question I'm taking. Payal, I'm not able.
Hello. No, that's fine. That's Kanchan Bani. That's a long surname.
Yeah, right. Yes.
So I want to check when you were talking
Louder,
about,
I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah, when you were talking about those in-stage and
I'm
out-stage.
not able to hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes, far better. Yes.
Yeah. So when you were talking about those in-stage and out-stage, like the fees bit, what did that mean? I didn't get the terms actually.
So in-state is the fees that domestic students pay.
Okay.
The US citizens, let's say, or people, and outstate is what international students pay. So I was just discussing those terms so that when parents, when they go to the university websites and go through the fees information, they see these terms and then they're not able to understand what they mean, So you should know that the fees that is applicable to an international student is the outstate fee.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Thanks for a very interactive session. I hope you got some information that you can use in your university planning, etc. We do extensive admissions counseling, SAT coaching, ACT, TOEFL coaching. If you need any help from any of us, just leave your number. We'll get in touch with you. So I myself mentor a lot of undergrad students. I work with students like since they're in class 8, class 9, and work with them to make sure that their profiles are built so that they have a fighting chance of getting admission. So if you need any such help, anything, you can leave your number. We'll reach out to you. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot.